Hey, welcome to our video on Buddhism. So what we're doing here is to show you the complete uh, lesson on Buddhism as I can see it from our textbook, Experiencing the World Religions. It's a vast and complex religion, been over 2,500 years. It's the fourth largest religion in the world. It's only exceeded by Christianity, Islam, and Hinduism, and in that order. It's about 7% of the world's population, with 535 million Buddhists. Here's a picture of where most Buddhists live or exist in the world, and they are right here. There we go. I'm trying to get my PowerPoint clicker. Anyway, here's most of them right here. We're Southeast Asia. This is called Southeast Asia. Recognize Asia is right here, the line of Asia. And it goes across here, actually. Goes up there. This is all Asia in here. This huge area for people to live. I want to point out some crossovers of Buddhism and Hinduism. Hinduism, as you may remember, has all these, there's a lot of different deities. But in Buddhism, Siddhartha Gautama left them behind. We use Dharma. In Hinduism, it's duty. Dharma in Buddhism, it's teaching. Okay, so there's some specific differences in those. This just gives you a quick chart. I'm just going to warn you, this is going to be kind of a long video. I can't say how long, but I'm expecting around 40 minutes. The founder of Buddhism is Siddhartha Gautama. He lived in the 6th century BC in modern-day Nepal. See that? And he was born, grew up, and until he was 29, he lived in the family of a prince. This is just a small picture of a real-time thing, what's going on in the place where he lived. And what we have here is a picture supposedly of where he was born. Don't know how they know that, but there's a lot of footprints going on for Buddha and where he traveled. He was known as the sage and sprang from his mother's side, took 7 steps, turned around and said, "I have been born to achieve the awakening for the good of the world. This is my last birth." He was reincarnated. He did take on the reincarnation teachings. I should say people believe in Buddhism that he was reincarnated. And the soles of his feet have these wheels, and on the palms of his hands. You'll recognize here that he also has the swastika. I don't know if you caught on to that in Hinduism, but it has been around for years. Even early American Indians had swastikas on their blankets. Most people today associate that with World War II, and it's been around, and it's a symbol of eternity. As a young man, his dad was told that if he stayed in his compound, didn't get out, he would be a great leader. If he got out and saw certain things, he would be a world religious leader. And at 29, Siddhartha left the compound, left his house, and saw an old man, a dying man, a dead man, and an ascetic. Now, an ascetic is a wandering person doing without. He is doing without a lot of food, just taking in a very little to sustain life. But that's what an ascetic is, in part. He was 29 when he left his family and set out to find, enlightenment. He wanted to seek truth. So he left his past, he left his family, he left his past religion, Hinduism, and sought out a new way. The Buddha did not I repeat, the Buddha did not find this new way immediately. He searched for answers, and for 6 years he traveled with some friends, 5 friends, so there were 6 of them, and he led a very ascetic life. And that is why in these pictures you see a very look like a dilapidated person. I mean, he's very withdrawn and barely can live. In fact, the story is that he was eating on very little, and therefore he did faint one day. And when he fainted, someone sustained him with a bowl of soup, and he revived and changed some of his thoughts. But up to this point, he had totally rejected the Vedic traditions, the caste system, and was looking more simple ways of life and meditation and detachment. He had a lot of questions he wanted answered, as we all do. I'm not sure Buddhism answers all of these questions, but they have answers for them, and they say they do. And at any rate, this is what they deal with, some of the questions. Supposedly, when the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, traveled with his 5 other seekers as a nomad and as an ascetic, kidney bean, a lentil, a grain of rice, and 1 sesame seed a day is all he ate with some water. And you can see a Hindu god here. This could be Krishna. It's probably Vishnu. Not a Buddhist or a Hindu, but that's what it looks like to me. His teachings taught the middle way, so on one extreme asceticism, and on the other extreme is hedonism, taking in and doing any pleasure you want. And he wanted to attain the path that led toward to nirvana. And he had quite a following early on. He died in his early 80s, so he lived a good full life, it sounds like. But he died laying down, and so there are several statues of him laying down, and that's why. All that we are is the result of what we have thought. The mind is everything that we think, or what we think we become. Some people would say this is Buddhist teaching. It could challenge, do we become what we think? That's what a lot of Buddhists would teach. But it's for you to decide and look at what we're going to look at in this video and see where you go with it. He attained enlightenment, and his followers, when he took the first meal that I mentioned earlier, when he was given that, they left him behind, and he stayed back and just meditated under a fig tree. And when he became enlightened over a period of time, taking the middle way, not overdoing it, not underdoing it, but surviving right down the middle, not too hot, not too cold, he came up with some teachings in doing this meditation, and then he was called the Awakened One, which is what the Buddha is about. You can see some slides here about what anger is for the Buddha, and it's just a random source. This is not the way to source a good resource paper or a research paper rather, but that's the best I could do on a short notice. There are 3 jewels of teaching. You can follow your text about page 125 here. They're called the 3 jewels. They are the Buddha himself, Siddhartha Gautama. Dharma is his teachings. As I mentioned, Dharma in Hinduism was about obedience and about following the correct path within the caste system. And then the last one is the Sangha, is the community that we have as they have as a believer. Then there's 3 marks of reality. They just recognize that this is true. Actually, it did come out of a Hindu philosophy. I was just reading in the Bhagavad Gita, and these things are very clear in that. Um, One, everything there, we live in a life of change. And if you pause the video and just thought about it for a while, think of all the changes in your life. You're not going to be the same in 2 years as you are now. You're different than you were when you were in high school, or different than you were when you were in grade school, and so on. People die, weather changes, we get older, and so on. We live in a life of change. There's no permanent identity. That is, we have no soul, according to Buddhist teachings, no attachments. And so therefore we have also then suffering. We live in a world of pain and hurt and trials and challenges. And those are the three marks, the basic of Buddhism. Why are there so few Buddhist rhythm and blue bands? Because they don't have any soul. That's why. I have a couple goofy questions for you like that in this video. There are four noble truths that he set out to teach, and with his friends, as his 5 friends that left him, they became actually his first 5 disciples, and they followed his teachings and then spread the word. The first noble truth is that suffering exists. It's part of the marks of reality. And the next noble truth is that suffering has its cause, and the cause is desire. That is, you want stuff. You have this insatiable lust for things, or experiences, or something, and when you don't get it, you suffer pain. That's what he's saying in this. And the third one is that suffering can end. You can change that, but this is how. You have to go through the eightfold path that he suggests. And this is the goal for non-attachment. The goal in Buddhism is basically to end this cycle of samsara we talked about in Hinduism, or maybe you read about. Samsara is that cycle, and you're going to end it here. And when you get non-attached and you're fully awakened, you will have your new way. He reached a state of profound understanding in a place called Gaya, and then he went to Deer Park in northern India. And the picture here below depicts these are his 5 friends here, and he is the Buddha, the wheel of teaching. That's the symbol of Buddhism. And the Siddhartha Gautama is that wheel of teaching. The Eightfold Path, then, are these 8 things. You'll find them in the book. The first one, and they are right or correct, full, complete understanding. Right or correct, or full intention, the correct intention. Speech is the third. Then we go into action. You need to do the right kind of work, right kind of things. Is the 5th one. And then the next one is the right effort, going on then with meditation and ending it out with contemplation. And with these, when you do these things correctly, you will gain enlightenment. So you can see that the real intention is to find wisdom, to find complete and full and correct understanding in all of these things. And he says that he has the guide now to find it. You must be your own lamp, be your own refuges. Take refuge in nothing outside yourself. Hold firm to the truth as a lamp and a refuge. Do not look for refuge in anything besides yourself. You can find this on page 125. The laying down Buddha, a common one in Southeast Asia, the way he died. There are 5 precepts, and they sound a little bit like the 10 Commandments. The 5 precepts are: 1, do not kill. Number 2, do not steal. Give you a little bit of insight on this one is do not lie. You might think that the 10 Commandments have that. It does not. You can look in the 10 Commandments of Jewish and Christian scriptures, and it does not say do not lie. It says do not something else. He says Do not bear false witness, which expands the idea of lying. It's not just lying, but don't exaggerate and don't mislead people. That's what false witness is. Just to clarify on this particular issue. And then the fourth one is do not misuse sex. Early on in Buddhism, it was about not having sex, but they recognized they weren't going to have a lot of people following Buddhism if they didn't allow sex. They would just be monks, and then they would die off, and maybe no more monks. But don't misuse it. Don't go out of the boundaries of a good relationship, is what they're saying. Don't commit adultery or fornication, just within the proper arena of marriage. And then the last one is do not consume alcohol or other drugs. And a faithful Buddhist will not drink alcohol. Like most other great religions of the world, Buddhism has divisions. There are 3 of them. And there's a fundamental belief that involves rebirth or reincarnation. We talked about that samsara, the cycle that's here on the lower portion of the screen. There's death and rebirth, and this happens over and over and over again in this reincarnation. And then to get out of it, you have to, in Hinduism, you have to get moksha. It liberates you from this. But in Buddhism, this idea is nirvana. It's not moksha. It's nirvana. And that's that end. That's the hopeful end of Buddhism, of enlightenment. You becoming one with the universe. Nirvana does mean blown out, like you can think of a candle and blow it out. Where does the flame go? Well, they could explain it as it goes into the universe. But blown out doesn't give a full understanding of what they're doing with the idea of nirvana, because we become part of the universe in the end. And we never had a real self, a personal soul anyway in the first place, according to Buddhism. But at any rate, this is the teaching, and nirvana is the end goal. The difference between the soul here, the Atman, and the idea of not having a soul in Buddhism is called the Anatman, or Anatta, and it's a no permanent identity. It's the law of impermanence, and then there is karma. And to deal with karma, to cleanse it, there's a cute little picture here I thought would be good, and you may have seen this if you looked at my PowerPoints. This would be there, and that's what karma is all about. It's going to whack you in the end. Karma can really be well, I'll let you finish that. Teachings reflected in Buddhism are these. One is ahimsa. That's what this sign is all about right here. Palm up, that's from Jainism, but ahimsa is to do no harm to anyone, or to anything. So in other words, don't kill animals. In Jainism, it's more strict than in Buddhism. But ahimsa, do no harm. There's no soul, so there's anatta. And then there's the next thing is that there is soul. The idea of a soul is not the same as others, but the idea that there is a karma that comes, what goes around comes around, sort of thing. There is reincarnation, and then the samsara, the cycle of moksha in Hinduism and in Buddhism. It's really nirvana that ends it. What does a Buddhist wish someone on their birthday? Many happy returns. Okay, another goofy joke. There's a guy that really spread Buddhism early on, and this guy was Ashoka. In 263, a Buddhist he had become already after 8 years or so. He had a great war in Kalinga. He said he killed probably 100,000 people, 150,000 were exiled, and maybe another 100,000 perished. And we were talking, you know, over 500,000 people that were killed, and he saw the disaster in wanting to expand his kingdom, and saw that and said, no more. This is not happening. So he converted to Buddhism. And in doing so, he spread the teachings of Buddhism. So in this pillar, what's fascinating about this pillar is that around the bases of it, they are edicts or teachings about Buddhism. And he spread these all across the nation, all across his new territory. This is his territory. And if you know India, this is India here, then there's Pakistan here, and then there's Afghanistan. And this is part of Nepal and China, and then maybe Bangladesh and Myanmar up there. So Ashoka really expanded the idea, and he planted, there's 19 of these pillars across the nation, and a lot of them are right in here, but about Buddhism. So recognize India is full of Buddhist history and Hindu history, and it has even Muslim history. So here are some of the Ashoka pillars that I mentioned, and I just think it's fascinating that he put these up 2,000 years ago. There's several of them that are still only 19. 19 exist today. So we have the three branches of Buddhism. There's Theravada, Mahayana, and Vajrayana. And right now we're going to take a look at Mahayana, the way of the elders. He broke away from the traditions, that is, Siddhartha Gautama. He broke away from the traditions of Hinduism and from the caste system, and challenged people to make their own way. You have to have the right understanding. You're on your own, but you have to learn it. And there's a new appreciation for simplicity, meditation, and the middle way. The goal is to become an arhat, that is, a person who has been enlightened, and in the end, then when they die, they'll break that cycle of samsara and go to nirvana. And this is just a map to show you. This is Southeast Asia, here India, and so these countries are where most of the Buddhist teaching resides, and it's very strong here, more so than even in China. Now, in China, there's a lot of Buddhists, but in China, there's a lot of people. So even 10% of China makes up more than some of these countries, because 10% of over 1 billion is a lot of people. Everyday way of a Theravadan monk could be many-fold, but one of the things they'll start off their day with is to beg. They don't cook in their own kitchens. They are made to be dependent upon others. They're making their own way, and it gives help to other people. Think of it this way. When you help other people, do you feel good about yourself? When you help someone that's hurting, do you feel like, oh, wow, that felt kind of cool? The idea behind begging is to give other people an opportunity to help them. So they do. And this creates a sense of merit in the minds of Buddhist teachings. And then we have, in the next part, they have do chanting. They'll chant at temples. They'll chant at funerals and weddings. And they may just chant in their own sitting meditation. Chanting comes in different forms. But they also have a lot of other things they may have responsibilities for in their day. If they live in a monastery, they may have to run a school or lead meditations for other people, help in medical clinics, and so on. But they're always encouraging wisdom, understanding, and showing compassion along the way. What you see at the bottom are two buildings that are called stupas. And the stupas are just relic holding places. There's like 80,000 of them across India and China. There's a whole bunch. And Ashoka actually put out a lot of these things. But the stupas were to supposedly hold a piece of the Buddha, or maybe something he touched, maybe a tooth or a bone or a hair or a comb. You know, the Buddha himself actually did not cut his hair, but they do cut their hair today. But anyway, those are stupas, and you'll see them across Asia quite a bit. And there's usually some form of a relic inside. The scriptures for Theravadan Buddhism are called the Tripitaka. And the Pali Canon, there's a Sanskrit canon as well. But the oldest and most complete Buddhist teachings are in the Pali language. So these are two different kind of languages that Buddhists use in their teaching. And I just wanted to let you see this. The Pali language looks a lot like this. I mean, it is Pali. And then down here is Sanskrit. And in both cases, there are just sets and sets of enormous amount of books written in this, and those people learn to read them. There are over 6,000 languages in the world that are being used right now, 6,000 plus. So just for what it's worth, they all have a unique kind of look. So the Tripitaka are made up into what they call three baskets: the Vinaya, the Vinaya Pitaka, the Sutta Pitaka, and the Adhidharma Pitaka. And so, at any rate, you'll see those. You may have already looked them up or something, but that's what these are. And here's one case that includes the Pali Canon. So it has the different baskets involved, and then at the bottom, the very lowest part actually has commentary. Well, there are several kinds of Buddhism. So we looked at Theravada, and I would like to explain it like this. Theravada Buddhism is your basic Buddhist, is kind of the beginning Buddhist teaching. In Theravada Buddhism, you will learn the way of the elders, the way of Siddhartha Gautama himself. This is the way he did things. But over a course of time, you know, in all religions, there's some changes, some additions, maybe subtractions, and so on. But Mahayana Buddhism then evolved shortly after the beginning. You know, obviously it wasn't before that. But it's called the big vehicle. And the idea is to incorporate whatever might help people gain greater spiritual awareness. So ritual is brought back into it. There are more deities. They do focus on compassion, and they obviously use wisdom, because you have to find wisdom yourself. You're on your own to that. There'll be people and gurus to help, but you're on your own, and maybe a celestial being, a bodhisattva, and I'll explain that in a bit, but these deities will help you with that. And then the goal is to become a bodhisattva, and what that is one, it was an arhat that has become enlightened, who decides not to go into nirvana, but stick around in this world to help others become enlightened. So in Mahayana Buddhism, and in really most all Buddhist areas, the three different sects, you're still saving yourself, but they're really focusing on showing compassion and empathy toward other people so that you can save them and save yourself. But in Mahayana, you're using your imagination, and you might focus a lot with your eyes shut and meditate, focusing on a certain kind of a deity or a certain kind of character or aspect that you want to grow in. And in Mahayana, they're saying, no, deep down, you're all a Buddha. We're all Buddhist, even if you think you're just a Christian, or if you think you're a Muslim or whatever. You're really a Buddhist. You just have to have the correct meditation techniques and the correct understanding, and you'll really gain your full enlightenment and Buddhahood. The new expansion also in Mahayana wanted to include women, because early on, in order to be a Buddha in Theravada Buddhism, you have to be a monk. So to include a greater number of people, and this Mahayana is including women, non-monks, and married people, and really challenging people to the awareness of the universe through different thoughts and through better and more complete understanding. It's called karuna. So the Bodhisattva are several different are mentioned in the book. One of them is Guinan, and there's a Maitreya, um, Malofo. But the Bodhisattva is a helper to help you attain Buddhism as well, to help you attain a nirvana. And if you choose to stick around and help others, then so be it. That's what that's about. But there's a three-body doctrine, and they're calling it the Trikaya, and the Buddha nature. It's the law or reality. There's a physical nature, and it's really you're transformed as a Bodhisattva. You've become knowledgeable and enlightened. It's your incarnation, and the last one is this perfect bliss. It's a supernatural, happy Buddha, and we really see this in Malofo. Here's Malofo here, and there are teachings that he will appear in the future and come back and help everyone understand how to become the real Buddha. You'll see in this picture there are some, they are not pearls, but these are prayer beads. Prayer beads, I think, are in all religions. I think that would make a great study for someone sometime to look at how the prayer beads are used in all the religions. I can't tell you how they're used here yet. Guinan is another bodhisattva, and she is the god of compassion and mercy. Early on, she's seen both male and female, but now it's just female. And I want to point out the many hands here that she has all over the place. And they don't always show it, but usually the hands have an eye in the hand. So when she's looking with her eyes and her hands, she's seeing all the people that need compassion. And that's the idea behind this. And so you meditate in front of her and try to become like her. And that's the idea of meditating on one of the deities. Okay, the halo symbolizes the power that she has to help, and the many arms, the ability to help all these people. One of the ways to get nirvana is by gaining your own emptiness, or emptying yourself, shunyata. It may be where shun comes from, even though I doubt it, but who knows. This goes along with this law of impermanence, the tathata, the reality moment that we have. The thatness before the whatness may not make a whole lot of sense, but that's all part of the teaching. They do have some discussions about this in Buddhism. The Mahayana literature includes the Tripitaka, but also more sutras, the Pure Land, the Lotus Sutra, and the other ones that I can hardly pronounce, along with commentaries. And I would like to illustrate here with all of these. These are pieces of wood that they've written on, and so they could go up in flames. But commentaries are just that, comments on a scripture. We have those in Christianity, so you can turn to a particular text and get commentaries on those, and that's all they are. They're just man's ideas. At least in Christianity, they are people's ideas. But in other religions like Buddhism, they take some of these commentaries that are written down, they're really good, and they make them part of scripture, so they become lifted up and are part of the Mahayana literature. There are several sects in Mahayana, and that own group. There are the Zen, which is the most recognized in America, Nichiren, and all of them are probably in Japan, but Jodo is one of the widely used in Japan. Tendai and Shenghong. You'll see those. You'll see those on other pages. So here's a mandala in the Mahayana teaching. A mandala is a pattern of squares and circles, and all these different look like, I don't know, openings. There's a different deity in each one of these, and they mean something. The colors mean something. And what they do, they get people to focus on these, and they use them as a teaching tool as well as a meditative trance-like state, looking at and trying to gain understanding by focusing on these things. And here's a different kind one. It's called the Womb World Mandala. And so they have a different perspective, but here you can see a lot of different people settings. Some of them have halos around them, other ones are not, that are suffering. And it helps us understand that the world is a place of suffering and they need help. So you should become a bodhisattva to help people get out of their pain and suffering and have better understanding. That's what the point of these are. They're teaching tools. The techniques for attaining awareness is through the cone, but they're just simple manual labor. Silent meditation and mundane tasks such as gardening and kitchen, repairing things, cleaning things. And the idea behind these mundane tasks is to help us understand that there's a reality beyond what you can see, touch, or feel. And that's important in Buddhism. The last branch we're going to look at is called Vajrayana, and it's the diamond vehicle or the lightning bolt. And in this, it's more of the mystical, the esoteric kind. It's not really openly taught. And from what I get in Vajrayana, if you really want to be a part of Vajrayana, you have to go through the Theravada first, take on some Mahayana activities, and we're talking 5 years before you get into the Vajrayana tactics and techniques. But at any rate, they're hidden, and it's a lot of times seen as the highest level of Buddhism of all of them. And the two things up on the right and the left here are lightning bolts. And again, the goal, like Mahayana, is to be a bodhisattva so that you can help others attain nirvana. The unique features of Vajrayana are the scriptures are tantras. They're even more than the other ones, and they have different things about them, and some of them are somewhat sexual, but nonetheless, they're trying to get you to be one with the universe. The Vajra is a metal divining rod, and that's what this is. And the idea, that's behind the lightning bolt. Then there's a prayer wheel, and with the prayer wheel, you run along the sides of these things, and you make them spin. Inside, there's a bunch of prayers, and the idea is that you let those prayers fly out of the wheel, and it goes into the universe, and it helps you get merit, whatever that means for them. Then there are also prayer flags. They'll be hanging from stupas, maybe hanging from their house or from a tree or just from a fence post. They'll have these prayer flags hanging. They'll have prayers written on them, and when they flap in the wind, then they're spewing out their prayer to the universe. Then there's lastly some mudras, and you'll see these in all variations of Buddhism, and they're just hand yoga, basically. Different things you'll see in different statues of Buddhism with their fingers done in certain ways, but they're called mudras. The last thing I really do want to show you is that the Lama is the spiritual leader of Tibetan Buddhism. He is their guru, the Dalai Lama. He is not the leader of all Buddhism. He is the leader of Tibetan Buddhism. Monasteries in Tibet are called the Yellow Hat monasteries sometimes. So you'll see different things that they're wearing. They're wearing yellow hats. You'll hear them blow trumpets and drums and do other things. And the idea is to scare away the demons. Well, that's pretty much all I have for you on Buddhism. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was beneficial, and your assignment will be to summarize this. And good luck, and I'll see you next time in another video.